Hello, everyone. My name is Lily Dewan, and I'm a member of the United Nations Association Australia of Young Professionals. At the UNAA, we aim to inspire and engage young professionals across the country. Our work is focused on promoting the Sustainable Development Goals, and we hold a range of in-person and online events throughout the year. I'm excited to be joined by Beth Delaney. Beth is an ambassador and deputy representative of Australia to the United Nations. Beth has extensive humanitarian, multilateralism, and development policy experience. Before her current role in New York, she was Australia's humanitarian coordinator, where she led the nation's policy, action, and partnerships to address global humanitarian needs and supported the Indo-Pacific region in improving its disaster reduction risk reduction. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me today, Beth. It's wonderful to discuss Australia's engagement with the UN and multilateral institutions with someone who witnesses it every day. I'll get straight to my first question. Why is Australia's engagement with the international system important?
Well, can I just thank you very much, Lily, for inviting me to join you today. It is really useful, I think, to have this kind of engagement so that maybe we can reconnect with people in Australia just in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis. But just to, I suppose, to answer your sort of first question, I think really international engagement with the international system underpins Australia's foreign policy, and it enables us to shape global outcomes in ways that really are in line with the interests of Australians and, of course, the interests of our region. We have a real commitment, I would say, here in New York, but also, of course, across the Australian government to engage in multilateral cooperation, because we think that it really addresses the shared challenges that we face as a country, and of course that because no country can really solve those alone. I would say that our engagement in the international system is long-standing. We are a founding member of the United Nations, and we're very proud of that. We continue to contribute to the system, whether it's our people here in New York, but also, of course, throughout. We have Australians working in the UN. We speak to them on a regular basis. But of course, we've also got organisations like yours that are, bringing what the UN does to the fore. And I think that's really, really important and an ongoing demonstration of Australia's commitment to our international engagement.
The message that you have about not every country can solve these global challenges unilaterally is very important, really re-emphasizes the role that DFAT plays. The next question is, what does Australia's day-to-day engagement look like with the UN?
Thank you. Well, it's as you can imagine, every day in New York is a new day. So ultimately, the purpose of what we do on a daily basis here is to advance our strategic priorities. So we advocate for our key interests, as I talked about. We're working to address shared challenges, but because that's basically in what we see as Australia and Australians' interests. So what that actually looks like is daily negotiation, it's daily representation here at UN headquarters. That might be meetings, it might actually be textual negotiations. We are involved in drafting resolutions, we deliver statements, we chair meetings. And of course, we also, a lot of what we do is around behind the scenes diplomacy, so coalition building and engaging with the UN system and partners. But I would also say that the UN, of course, is a global enterprise, and what that means is that we do a lot of our engagement with UN New York here, but we also engage with Australia's broader network. As you know, Vienna deals mostly with sort of disarmament, so we work with them because often what happens is the work that they do flows to New York. So there's a lot of engagement, a lot of coalition building, but then also a lot of daily grind down in the what we call the the windowless rooms of the United Nations. Yeah.
Yeah, very, 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 very important. You've touched like a little bit on it, but besides the UN, what forums does Australia engage with, particularly with reference to the Indo-Pacific region?
Yeah, I think I mean that's a really important point. I think our foreign minister has spoken about the fact that Australia engages through in multilateralism in a range of different ways. So the UN, of course, is the foundation of a lot of that work, but we have to be able to build coalitions. We have to engage in multiple different ways. For us, I think if you think about Australia being surrounded by the region that we're surrounded by, a lot of that engagement happens through, for example, the Pacific Island Forum, and using those engagements to deepen what Australia is able to do from a regional security perspective that then, for example, translates into the international security, or whether it be on climate action, but also in prioritising the way that the Pacific is dealing with these global challenges and presenting those solutions to what we do here in New York. ASEAN, of course, is also central to what we do in terms of Australian engagement. They, of course, are important again in the regional security piece. We work very closely with a lot of our ASEAN counterparts here, but I think that the importance of ASEAN, if you think about broader stability in the region and the centrality of ASEAN in that process, is really key. We also, of course, are members of the Quad, and I'm sure you're both listeners have heard of AUKUS. So really, we use it and they're all there to support the overall objectives that we have about kind of building more stable, prosperous, a more stable and prosperous region, Australia and the world. But also, I think importantly, a lot of what we do speaks to how we ensure the rules deliver for our own sovereignty and the sovereignty of our region.
The next question would be, what does Australia in the international community gain by the nation providing aid, humanitarian and otherwise?
So, I think we would see the work that we do through the government's development program, through our humanitarian program, and as you know, as you mentioned, I was the kind of humanitarian coordinator, and we released a new strategy as part of that. Ultimately, it's a strategic investment in our region. It's a strategic investment in global security and prosperity. I would say, the other element to that is that, when you're talking about the humanitarian piece, it also delivers life-saving outcomes for people in need, and I think that's really a critical piece of what we do. But not all of it, right? A lot of what we do through the development space is actually about preventing conflicts. It's about building resilient communities, and I think the work that we do ensures that we're able to share in the benefits that economic growth and prosperity deliver. So I think the development program, what we gain as an international community in collaborating on development, on humanitarian assistance and response, really speaks to the points that we were making right at the start, just around how we support stability, how we support prosperity. I'd say one of the partnerships I think that I didn't mention previously was the work that we do in the economic and trade space, and that's obviously a really important element of the development agenda. We work really closely with the international finance organisations, for example, and the various banks in the region.
Wonderful. And what do you see as Australia's strategic interest as a middle power in the system with shifting geopolitical realities?
Well, I think first and foremost, it probably goes back to why we've always had a global outreach, right? We've always seen ourselves as engaging. Even if you go back to Indigenous Australians, they were the first traders, they were the first diplomats. I think as Australia has always played a role in working in resolving challenges globally. I think the importance of us engaging at a time when things are shifting, as you said. Geopolitical realities mean that there are challenges to engaging. There are barriers to achieving outcomes. But ultimately, we as Australians are always outward looking, and I think it's really important that we, as Australia, are able to continue to do that. I think it helps us to shape those collective outcomes that we talked about. Australia is able to influence. Uh, Maybe because of our size, we bring a lot of enthusiasm and to the table. But I think it also goes back to that point around we as Australia need to work with coalitions, and so we're also able to use our role and the coalitions that we have to advance practical kind of priorities. I spoke a little bit about the Pacific. I think it's really important that we bring our experiences and our knowledge, but also the voices of our region into the multilateral space, because ultimately it's about presenting solutions. It's about kind of building common understanding of how we push things forward and how we get outcomes. And I just think that we need to ensure in all the work that we do that we defend what the United Nations was established for, which is really the kind of rules about how we as states need to behave, but also ensuring that ultimately why we're doing that, and that's for, as I said, for Australians in our case, but of course every country comes with their own citizens in mind. So.
Thank you. We've probably touched on this, given that you've talked about the strategic investment in stuff like the Global Development Program and the importance of working with coalitions and bringing different voices across. But what do you think would change if we were to lose multilateral institutions like the UN and the ICJ? Like, how much worse off would we be?
I mean, it's always a bit difficult, the counterfactual, isn't it? But we often refer to the fact that if you didn't have the United Nations, you would have to create it. And I think we really need to keep that in mind when we're looking at what's happening in terms of, I suppose, the disruption that's occurring within the system, multilateral system, but also what we're seeing play out, as you referred to previously, in terms of the geopolitical change that's occurring. Ultimately, multilateral institutions like the United Nations, like the International Court of Justice, they are the frameworks that countries have agreed on in terms of the rules that basically enable us to protect our sovereignty, to enforce the various rights that certainly in whether it's human rights, whether it's the right to vote, all those things, all those kinds of norms and practices that maybe we take for granted. They are all the foundations of global rules and the protections that we have through those rules. I think we would lose the ability to dialogue in the way that we currently dialogue. I mean, really, you have 193 states around the table. That's really important in terms of the ability to understand and reach compromise on issues, and that's really important in terms of what we refer to as the peaceful dispute of resolution. So I think it reduces the risk of escalation. It is a forum to enable that dialogue to occur. I think I've talked about the voice that we're able to bring from the region. That it does create a platform, an equal platform as well, in terms of that dialogue and that voice. So everyone, nation in the UN has a vote, and that's really important in terms of how we are able to progress issues that require collective global action. But I think also, ultimately it risks a more unstable and power-driven globe. So I think we would you would see more unilateral action. You would see, perhaps the larger powers really having the greater influence over a system. Whereas I think at the moment, what we need to do is, and that's not your question, but the risk is that you would create even more instability than we currently have in the system.
I love your point about the UN, we'd need to create it. The importance of the sort of the equal dialogue and one country gets one vote is very important. It gives, that power to the smaller population countries.
Yeah.
How do you see Australia's geography impacting its ability to participate in international debates? Maybe you don't think it prohibits us at all. Obviously, we're able to give a voice to the Indo-Pacific region. But how do you see, like, do you think there are any barriers to our geographic position? Obviously, we can't change it, but how does that inform our policy approach?
I mean, I think where we're situated, obviously, makes us unique in a lot of ways. I mean, every country is unique, but I think so. It certainly presents some challenges, but I don't know that it necessarily presents kind of barriers. I would say, obviously, our location maybe makes engagement more complex logistically. As an example, when we're negotiating, you know, we can't always what we say call back and get instructions because that we don't. It would involve waking someone up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, logistically, yes, it can create challenges, but I think the way that modern diplomacy works, then the kind of network that we have, but also, we have a very strong presence here in New York that ensures that we're able to engage in those global debates. So it's about the network, but it's also obviously about the way that diplomacy works. When we're no longer having to travel long distances necessarily to be able to do the diplomacy that we do. I think our our geographic location or position just reinforces the importance of institutions like a place that we're able to gather, because everyone everyone comes from somewhere in a sense, so it's important to agree on where we can all come together to have that dialogue. And certainly we referred to the point about the Indo-Pacific. I mean, what we're able to do is it does shape our perspective. I mean, we are surrounded by by the Pacific, by Southeast Asian nations, and I think that brings a particular perspective to what we talk about in the UN. It brings really practical examples of how, for example, climate change is impacting, or we talked about, you mentioned the work that we've done around disaster risk reduction. I think things like the ongoing economic impacts of, for example, the conflict in the Middle East at the moment. That all has implications that are very very real for the countries in the Pacific, and we're able to actually understand those and bring those to the global stage. So while it presents challenges, it also presents a lot of opportunities.
Given that we are the UNAA for young professionals, we'd love to get your opinion on what you think the role of young professionals is in this space. What opportunities are there for career engagement in international relations, law, and policy? And where do you see final year uni students and people at the beginning of their career? Where do you think that they can position themselves to get into spaces like yours?
I mean, this is probably one of the hardest questions. I mean, the UN does have an office that's specifically focused now on kind of young people and engaging on issues that are important to young people. I think that's one avenue, obviously, but obviously they need content. So I think bringing that content to the global stage in terms of those perspectives that young professionals bring, the energy that you can bring, can help shape a system that maybe sometimes feels a little bit stagnated. I think, there are so many different pathways to do that. I was actually talking to a group of school students yesterday in New York, and I think one of the points I was trying to make was actually because of the nature of the work that occurs in the United Nations and through multilateralism, you need a broad range of skills. You need scientists, you need you know agricultural specialists. You need a range. International relations, of course, specialists. So you do need a range of skills, and but ultimately, it's about how you engage in those conversations. It's about the ability to kind of analyze issues and contribute to debates, basically. In terms of pathways, I think there are internship opportunities. We, of course, would promote the DFAT grad program as a really important way of engaging with issues to do with foreign policy. The UN system itself, of course, has a young professionals program. The nature of global and international engagement means that there are a range of stakeholders, whether it's think tanks, non-government organisations, and as I said, I think they all bring different perspectives. So find those opportunities that you love and engage in them, and bring an international perspective to the things that you do is perhaps what I would say.
Yes, well, thank you for your time, Beth. Your insights into Australia's international engagement and its ongoing importance are valuable to young professionals like myself. Your advice and the role that we see Australia having in advancing its strategic interests and being your role in New York, being there to advance the interests of Australia is definitely very important. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lily. It's been a pleasure.